So, hello, my name is Jason Lazarus. I am on the Alaska Photographic Center's board of directors, and I'd like to welcome you here tonight for April's uh, what is this, third Tuesday? Yeah, third Tuesday event. These are a monthly feature that we offer here at APC, bringing photographers from around the region, not necessarily just Alaska, but from around the region, and introducing them to interesting photographers, artists, and go-getters out there. And recently, we've had quite a really nice um, set of presentations in the last couple of months. So I am very happy to have with us tonight Sarah Manriquez. I know Sarah Manriquez in Fairbanks because, of course, she's a Fairbanks-based photographer, but also a documentary filmmaker. And I know her from way back in 2015 when she took my basic digital photography course, and I knew right off the bat as soon as she took that she was destined for great things. She had a really amazing creative eye and was not content with just doing the bare minimum. In fact, I recently talked to Sarah and admitted how amazed I was at her ability to truly uh, take certain elements that photographers say that they are passionate about and really grab hold of it and do the work that's needed in that region. And specifically when I'm talking about Sarah, I'm amazed at the work that she's done with the homeless population in Fairbanks and really focusing on the social needs in our community and uh, not just taking pictures. I've known dozens of photographers that go out there and take pictures of homeless people and take advantage of their situations for their own personal gain. Sarah's the exact opposite of that and has gotten involved and gotten the photographic community in Fairbanks and artistic community in Fairbanks involved in doing amazing things for this community and really shedding a light by allowing them to speak with their own eyes and their own voice. And it's been amazing to see the projects that she's been working on. So when I say that Sarah does things that I only wish that I could do, I truly do mean that. I'm amazed at her tenaciousness, what she's been able to do in just a few years since that first photography class that she took with me in 2015. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah Manriquez. Sarah?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me this month for Photo Talk Tuesday. I'm really honored to be here. I was actually really surprised when Jason reached out to me. It's like, it's kind of fun when you're doing all of this work and you're immersed in everything that you do, and then someone reaches out to you who you admire or an organization that you admire, and they're interested in seeing your work, and it just gives you kind of like a really warm feeling in your heart. So I'm really happy to be here, and I see tons of friends and colleagues that are joining us today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate family and friends who made the effort to be here and support me. So let's get started. So today I'm going to be talking to you about a broad work that I've been doing, which in general is the idea is homelessness. And throughout a lot of different projects that have evolved from one small project, I'm seeking to learn to answer the question of why people are homeless. And so this entire body of work, all projects involved, I refer to as finding home. So, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, especially for those of you who don't know me. So, I moved to Alaska in 2012 from Tampa, Florida. So, I kind of went from basically the equator all the way up to the Arctic Circle. And the first thing that I started doing was being a tour guide in with Northern Alaska Tour Company and took people all the way up to the Arctic Circle and back. I used to play with the Fairbanks Symphony. I work with the Fairbanks Concert Association. I've worked a lot with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so I really enjoy organizations that are involved in the community. So the very first project evolved from a class project that I did under the direction of mentor Katie Orlinsky. Katie Orlinsky was a Sneddon Chair for the University of Alaska Fairbanks Communication and Journalism program. And I took her class, and it was a photojournalism class. And one of our first projects she wanted us to do, every week we had like a challenge or something she wanted us to think about. And one of our first projects is she said, I want you to choose a social justice issue that is important to you. And I want you to go photograph it. And that was the only directions that she gave. She wanted to make it really open and allow us to kind of explore and find something that really was important to us. And so for me, I immediately knew what I was going to be photographing when she made this assignment because I've found myself in a situation where I never had a voice. And that situation started um, when I was young, and I ended up finding myself homeless. And so for me, when I was homeless, I felt like I had no voice. I felt like no one really was interested in my voice. So not only did I have one, but no one would listen anyway. And so many other strong and mixed emotions about what was going on. And so I wanted to make a project that was going to have an intimate look at people who experience homelessness and begin to humanize those people and give them a voice and give them a platform to stand on. So some of the big overarching theme here is, why are people homeless? And I ask you to take a minute right now and just think about, why do you think people are homeless? And the question is overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. And at first we think, well, maybe it's because, some of them there, a lot of really negative stereotypes out there, and, they're lazy. They just don't want to get a job. Or, a lot of them are drug addicts and all of these things. And we kind of put that blame on top of those people and say, you're homeless because it's your fault. You did this to yourself. And I wanted to explore a different side of homelessness and say, but is that really why people are homeless? And I don't think it is. And I know that from my own personal experience. So, in New Mexico, I ended up living in a transitional living center for a couple of years. And I ended up there kind of like by fluke. It was just sometimes life takes you places that you don't expect. And so, thinking about this project that Katie Orlinsky gave us, I knew that I wanted to do something that was really intimate. And so, I thought about, from my own experience, what was something that someone would never think of when they're maybe thinking of people who are homeless, like as a group. And I remember specifically every single one of the people who lived in this transitional living center with me, they all had one object that was so important to them. It was so important to them. And no matter what happened, no matter where they went, no matter how much they lost, they never lost this object. And so I wanted to go into the community and work with people who are experiencing homelessness and take portraits of their hands and think about, ask them, what is your object? And I at first was a little nervous because I wasn't sure, maybe if this unique to me. Like, I was pretty young when I experienced this, and so maybe it's a youth thing. And so I was excited to find out that it definitely isn't. People, it's amazing the kind of tokens that we carry in our lives that mean so much to us from people that we love. So I started what I call my home in my hands. And not everyone wants to be the face of homelessness. And so these were meant to just be really intimate portraits of something up close that's really important to someone, their most valuable object. And so this is Angela. And Angela's most valuable object is her first day of sobriety coin. And she told me that I carry this every day and I read it every morning to remind me that I just need to keep going and every day is new. And she said, "This is one of my most important objects." And so this is Angela. This is a wonderful person named Sarah, and her most important item is her ring. And for her, she has this kind of really beautiful story about this ring. This ring was given to her by a family member who, made her feel very loved. And she, before becoming homeless and moving up to Alaska, she got to a point where she had to pawn it. She needed the funds, she needed the money, she had nothing of value. And this was the last thing she had of value. And so she pawned it so she was able to have money in order to be able to purchase food. Now, when she lived at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission here in town, she ended up sharing this story with a lot of her roommates that were bunking with her. And they all decided to go on a secret hunt to find this ring and to see if it was still possibly in that pawn shop. And so they put all of their money together, and I'll be darned, some things are meant to be. They went to the pawn shop and they found her ring. So they all put their money together, purchased this ring back for her, and gave it to her for Christmas a couple years ago. And so now she's able to have this ring back on her hand. And it's something that is so important to her, as it was this token that was given to her by someone who loved her very much. Now, another person who had their most important object, this is Felicia. Felicia has now become an amazing friend to me and has driven a huge part of my work. And we'll talk about her more as we move on. But her most important object was this photograph. And this photograph is of her son and of her daughter. And this is the only photograph that she has of them together. And so this is her most important project. Now, through meeting Felicia here, she and I immediately hit it off. She has so much energy. She's so vibrant. She's so open. She's so strong. And she was in a place in her journey where she was ready to talk about what she was experiencing. And I think, that's a really important thing to note when we're talking about Felicia, or when we're talking about people who are in situations that are hard. You have to be ready to talk about your story. It can't just be put on you. And so, in another class I was taking simultaneously with the class that I took under Katie Orlinsky, I was taking a course with Rob Prince. He does all kinds of stuff in Fairbanks. For those of you who are familiar with Dark Winter Nights, it's probably the big one. But he was my teacher and mentor, and I was in a documentary film class with him. And he wanted us to select a topic, any topic, and pursue that as a documentary film. And I was spending so much time with Felicia and documenting her life through photography. And I thought, why don't I also think about this as a film as well? And so I started working with Felicia over the course of a couple years, actually, where I would just go and see her life and see what she did. And so this is a body of work that I call Genesis. And this is all about Felicia. It's all about her life and her experience. Felicia has been in and out of emergency shelters in Alaska since 2015. And as of August 2017, she joined the Genesis Recovery and Relapse Prevention Program at the Fairbanks, at the Coalition. And it's a faith-based program, and it helps with recovery from addiction, along with a lot of other things, like a lot of life skills and transitioning from being homeless into the world. And after clients join a program at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission, they become a programmer, is what they're called. And they have the option to move into a larger room that's shared with other roommates so they can customize their spaces with photos and other decorative items. Versus if they're not a part of a program, it's just bunk beds that are in a larger room. So here, what we're looking at is Felicia in her space, and we see her photos. We see a table that she has here, a Bible on it that's well used. She's right by a window, and we see a lot of certificates that she's proud of. So this was her space at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. So Felicia loves photos. And here we see this wall of photos. And on the left hand side, what we see are people who are family and friends and loved ones, important events, people in her life who she misses, she loves, and that have changed her life. And the images on the right hand side are majority people who have passed away, people who Felicia's loved very much that no longer are here anymore. In this particular image, Felicia is holding a laminated photo of her son, Justin Kavanaugh, and he is sitting in a pew, and it's in a church, and it's of her mother's funeral. And Felicia says when she looks at the images that she can almost feel the presence of her mother in the church. And she said that she can see a ghosted image of her mother's hand passing by the church pews in this particular photo. And so this particular photo for her was really important. And every time she looks at it, she just beams with a smile like she is here. Felicia holds the opposite side of another laminated photo, and it's of her son, Justin Kavanaugh, and his father, Donald Joseph. And Justin met his father for the first time when they were both incarcerated at the Fairbanks Correctional Facility. Donald was in and out of prison throughout Justin's life. And after Donald was released from an 18-year prison sentence, he overdosed and was found frozen outside in the winter of 2016 in North Pole, Alaska. So, this is the only image that exists that has both father and son pictured in it. So, Felicia has been on a journey of sobriety and one that she's very proud of. And so, right now, in this particular image, she's showing us all of her different sobriety coins. So, these are all the coins that she's earned over time from Alcohol Anonymous. And she regularly attends those meetings. The coins were awarded to her every month that she attended and are representative of her sobriety and also her continued desire to stay clean. And so for Felicia, she also had some issues with addiction to drugs. And so her sobriety for her was everything. Her sobriety was about a clean lifestyle, about doing better, about turning over time and trying again and realizing that we can always rebuild. And Felicia carries these coins with her at all time. And she told me that she likes to feel the weight of them in her wallet. She likes to feel the weight of her decisions, she told me. So, this is the Fairbanks Rescue Mission, and a big part of homelessness is a lot of solitude. It's not that every moment is alone, but we spend a lot of time alone when one is homeless. And so we see here Felicia Kavanaugh walking outside of the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. But for me, this photo was kind of about a journey that we take that's an individual journey. And although we can have lots of wonderful people who support us on the outside, in the end, we have to walk that journey and make it through to get to the other side. So Felicia's son is currently serving time and was at the Fairbanks Correctional Facility. And so she made an effort to try and visit him as much as she possibly could. Now, a lot of misconception about homelessness is that people just don't work. but that's just not true, especially if people are involved in organizations like the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. Felicia was required to do certain chores and activities and work certain positions within the organization in order to earn money so that she could pay for her stay at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. So it's not just free to be at a shelter. That's pretty rare, unless it's in a larger city where we have some of these like really big shelters where it's just a one night thing. But a lot of times there's, cost involved. And so she could either have a part-time job and pay them from that, or do some of these chores and do as many hours as she needed to complete in order to complete her run. And so while she's juggling all these things, she also has to apply for so many jobs per week in order to stay eligible for staying at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission. And for Felicia, being a former convict with a record, she struggled to get employment. And it didn't really matter where she went. It's difficult when you don't have interview clothes, when you don't have a car to go anywhere, you don't have reliable transportation, and you're trying to go to these interviews, you're trying to get a hold of people. Sometimes you have a phone, sometimes you don't. A lot of things are so iffy. It's challenging to think, how does one get a job? And so in this image, we are watching Felicia wait for the bus. It is a multi-hour journey to get from the Fairbanks Rescue Mission to the Fairbanks Correctional Facility because of the way that our public transportation systems are set up in Fairbanks. And so depending on the day, and depending on the specific visiting hours that were available at the correction facility, she'd potentially be getting up at 5 a.m. to catch a bus that would take about an hour to get to the correctional facility, visit her son there, and then kind of do the whole thing back. Or sometimes at that point, the buses wouldn't be running any longer and she'd just have to walk. And as we know in Fairbanks, it gets pretty cold. So this is Felicia and I on the bus. And so the bus is something Felicia's very familiar with. She knows every line, every pathway, but it still doesn't make it necessarily, at least in Fairbanks, an efficient form of transportation. It's challenging for her to get around to these interviews, for her to try to get to work on time daily without a reliable vehicle. These things are challenging. Here we see Felicia walking through the visitor's door. We can see part of her son's face in the background. She's having a visiting session with her son, and her nephew decided to come along with. And I was really fortunate, while we were way more into the project, about a year or so. I was actually able to, was granted permission to be able to go into the facility and actually meet Justin myself with Felicia. And I have some really neat footage from that in the documentary film. So when we talk about homelessness too, um, something that I think people might not realize is that there's this element of perseverance and this element of grit that these people have to every day fight the uphill battle. And of course, there are good things. And obviously, there are some bad things. But to fight the uphill battle is hard. And so for Felicia, she ended up writing a letter to herself from God of the things that she uh, wished that someone would tell her, that maybe God could say to her. And so this letter is of that. And another thing that's really important to Felicia, for her personally, to be able to meet these big uphill battles every day, is to pray. For Felicia, she's a very religious person. She goes to church regularly. She has an amazing relationship with her pastor. And praying for her has been a huge relief to try and think about, how do I move on to the next thing? What am I going to do tomorrow? And being able to pull your bootstraps up and keep going. So this work ended up being shown, overall, Genesis, a Through Our Eyes project, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and My Home in My Hands at the International Gallery of Contemporary Art in Anchorage. And the entire show was called Finding Home. And this is Felicia and I in the center of the gallery during opening night. And so for this particular show, what I decided to do for Genesis is I wanted to create a situation where people could actually walk through these photos, that they could travel along Felicia with her journey. So the images are set up in such a way that they're actually kind of like a maze of images. I wanted people to be able to follow that story by literally walking alongside her. So these images were suspended in the air, and it was an installation I was really inspired by from Family of Man in the 60s. Some of these images are actually just words as well. And there was a really big discussion that I had with mentors who were working with me on this project. And one of my mentors said, I don't know if I like the words so big like that. You're treating it like it's a photo. And this is a photo show. So the photos are the most important part. And I remember hearing that and then thinking, why did I make these letters so big? Why did I choose to frame these captions that essentially go along with Felicia's story? And to me, for this particular show, the words were just as important as the photos. Because for me, we're we're needing to know what is really going on in some of these images, and having the opportunity to be able to actually learn what we're looking at as we're walking through it when it has to do with something that's a very complicated topic, just in society in general, but also about someone's personal life. Like, this is Felicia's life, and it's hard to just look at photos and say okay, okay, and keep going. And so I wanted to treat these words just as important as the images and allow people to be able to get some of the really specific, intimate insight that I had the opportunity to do. Additionally, for the show, there were TV screens all around the edge of the gallery, and they were cycling through lots of different photos, but some of those photos were the "My Home in My Hands" images. This is Felicia and her long-term partner. I was really excited that I was able to bring Felicia down from Fairbanks to Anchorage and be able to have her be at the show, because really, I think important parts of this project happen when the work is being made. This was a really healing journey for both Felicia and myself. I have never really been in a situation where I've wanted or asked to share my story, because it's something that's so private and so personal. And I think there's a lot of scrutiny that can come along with admitting to something like being homeless or having experienced that. A lot of people sort of think, what did you do wrong to get to that place? And so making these images with Felicia and being able to share this journey, it was very healing for me, I think, as we went through it. And it gave me an opportunity to be able to talk deeply with someone who understood some of the darkest moments of my life. Now, a third part of this project involved a project and organization called Through Our Eyes. So, My Home in My Hands, I really felt was an intimate look, and an intimate look at people's humanization. It was a humanization piece where we really thought about people as people. And I think sometimes, with any groups that are, stereotyped to do anything, we can look at that group and say, them. And I didn't want us to be able to say them with My Home in My Hands. I wanted us to say, wow, this is Angela. Wow, look at Sarah's story. And have them be relatable and touching. We all have items in our home that we'd never be able to part with, something that's so special that was given to us by someone important, or that we earned, or whatever it might be. And then with Genesis, Felicia's story, we were able to travel along with her as an individual and look at one individual story and see what her story was and what her journey was and what her path was. And the Through Our Eyes project, I worked with Jason Williamson, who very quickly became a mentor and a friend. And he is the creator of the Through Our Eyes project. The idea of the project is to pass out disposable cameras to those who are interested in participating, who have experienced homelessness or are experiencing homelessness, and just ask them to tell their story. And so it gives them an opportunity to take their own images because so far with My Home in My Hands and Genesis, it's been through my lens. It's been through how I interpret, Felicia's experience through my lens. And so it was really important to me to kind of add this other element where we were seeing individual people's voices stand on their own. It wasn't just through my lens. I wanted to know what they thought was important. And so the questions we asked them were pretty simple. We handed them cameras and we said, photograph your life. And, we didn't say things like, try and show me what homelessness means. Like, there's no right or wrong answer of what homelessness means or what it looks like. And I think that's a big part of this project is realizing that, these people frequent the same places that we go. They eat at the same places. They walk the same streets. They live in our community, and they are our neighbors. And so in conjunction with Stone Soup and the amazing Hannah, I was able to put together a group of volunteers, about 15 to 16 volunteers, who helped me hand out all these cameras on the day of. And Jason was able to donate those cameras through the project through our eyes. So that was amazing. And through some grant funds, I was able to get t shirts for all our volunteers, but more importantly, our photographers who were participating, and kind of like a nice little gift bag for them that included some essentials, like hand warmers and gloves, socks, things like that, that are going to keep them warm and keep them safe in cold temperatures. And so we had all these little bags put together for them. Every participant got a bag. We also had folks who were just sitting out in the eating area at Stone Soup because, it's pretty intimidating when a big group of people comes in and they suddenly want to know your most intimate personal details. And so we didn't want anyone to feel pressured. For Through Our Eyes, this project is specifically for people who are interested in sharing their story. And if they're not at a place where they're ready to share, that's okay. No pressure. We were only interested in and working with people who were really excited about that, who wanted an opportunity to share their voice. So we had folks who were sitting out with people while they're eating, just talking to them. We weren't here to make a hard pitch or a sell. And different people, depending on what their interests were, they were maybe curious just to have a camera, or it was really important them to have an opportunity to share their story, but they came and signed up. And so there's lots of different paperwork that involves with the volunteers, so they were able to take care of all of that in Stone Soup's office. And every person got a camera, and it was put in a Ziploc bag to keep it weatherproof in case it was dropped in water or whatever. It had a little bit of protection with the outdoors, and then they just needed to turn it back into us. And so we gave them a couple weeks to do that. And also, I had some amazing friends. This is Baxter Bond. And I had a few other amazing photographer friends who are actually on board there, because a lot of times we hear, oh, well, I'm not an artist, or I'm not a photographer. I can't take the camera. And that's just not true, because what we're looking for is their story through their own eyes. We're not looking for, the next National Geographic photo cover. We just want to know what they see. We want to see what they see their life. And so I did have some really amazing photographer friends who were on board, who stayed there and had a handy packet that included a lot of different images that other projects for Through Our Eyes throughout the country had done. So they had an idea of like, what were people taking photographs of? And also with a digital camera, we want to just give them some pointers, like if you are inside, you probably want to turn in the flash. Otherwise, your photo will probably be pretty dark. And just things like that. And then afterward, for those people who are interested, I asked if I could take their portrait. And so a lot of folks took that opportunity, and I was able to kind of sit down with each person and talk to them a little bit and learn about why they were excited about this project or why they decided to choose a camera. And it's amazing when you start these conversations, people can be so vulnerable and so open when you're genuinely interested to listen and you're genuinely interested to know what their life is like, what they go through. And so I collected all of these portraits, and these portraits were also displayed at Finding Home on those television screens. And they were also put all together next to the images that were captured by our photographers to make sure that, we saw their faces. I didn't want all of these images on the wall that were anonymous. These were not anonymous images. John took this image, Felicia took that image. These belonged to people and they were artwork by them. And so this was the whole group that worked with me. A couple people had to leave early, so not everyone's in this image, but I'm so grateful to everyone in this photo for, coming together. I think that's a big part of what a lot of my work asks for is for community members to come together for this because we are a community and we all need to work together in order to make sure we can all live well. So this is what the installation looked like for these through our eye images. So I printed them huge, and I wanted to be able to get them as big as I could. So for being reasonably priced at the same time, working within the funds that I had, and so I was able to get them to be pretty big, 20 inches by 30 inches, and I printed them on foam core, so that way they were fairly stable. And also, I was able to print much bigger on foam core. And so these are images of all the people who had captured photos. And some of them might be of what people expected, but others weren't. Like in this image, we can see this black and white photo specifically, and it's of these grasses. And firstly, I would have never known that this image was taken on a disposable camera. And secondly, it looks like we're looking at Africa. Like it's amazing, but this is somewhere in Fairbanks. And so people really got an opportunity to be creative and to show the things that were important to them, the places that they frequented, the living situations that they lived in, the activities that they participated in. This is what our homeless population looks like. Not a lot of these stereotypes that we have in our minds. Sure, those certainly do exist. That's where stereotypes come from, but they aren't the majority of people. In fact, I think I would go to say that the majority of people that are homeless, you probably wouldn't know they're homeless. It's not something that they're going to openly share. Like when I lived at the Transitional Living Center, when Felicia lived at Fairbanks Rescue Mission, I don't really walk up to people and say, "Hi, my name is Sarah. I am homeless. Would you like to hire me for this job?" It's something that's really private, and we don't really talk about that. So these people are literally your neighbors. They're literally your coworkers, and they live and work beside you. What was really nice too is Felicia being at the opening reception, she was able to speak and talk, for herself about what this whole experience was like, what her story was like, what her hangups were like, and that was really special too. I have some video of that on my website and on my social media platforms. I think Facebook has that video. And these are some of the portraits that I captured of our amazing photographers. I think it was good to remember that, seeing their faces is so important for those who are willing to be the face of this, because these are normal people and they're kind and they're loving, and some are quiet and shy, and some are wise and older, and some are um, born and raised in Alaska, and others have traveled here from other places. And they all have these really complex, interesting stories that all stand on their own. These are all individual people experiencing life. And this last one here is just completely black. And a really interesting thing ended up happening during the Through Our Eyes project. What ended up happening is the majority of my photographers were homeless youth. And due to confidentiality reasons, I wasn't even allowed to know their names. I worked specifically with the organizations to have the cameras delivered to the kids who were interested in participating. And my youngest photographer was 8 years old. And so, in addition to having the faces of all these brilliant photographers who participated in the Through Our Eyes program, I had a lot of black squares that were represented in the block of images of all of the photographers who were there. And it's because we didn't get to see their face. We don't know who they are. And it gave me an opportunity to talk about something that's probably most under talked about is homeless youth. There are so many homeless kids that, are either in programs or just struggling with their parents, and they are probably the most invisible population within this group. And so it was important to me to have them represented, but also for people to realize that they're so invisible. And yet they were the majority of photographers in the show for Through Our Eyes. They took the majority of images. They were the majority of people who turned their cameras back in. So, why are people homeless? We kind of come back to this. Why does this happen? Is it systemic? Is it, you know, what's the issue? Why does this happen to people in our community? And so I wanted to get a different perspective on this answer. And all of the people that I photographed, all the people that I worked with and got an opportunity to talk to, I asked them, if you could boil it down to one thing, one concept, one idea, what would be the thing that you felt that you lost that that ended up making you homeless? Like what contributed? The main reason, what could you tell me? And I asked them for one word. And I made these words and made them as magnets that I stuck on a house. And the house was covered with their faces, and all of the magnets were for sale. And the idea was that people would pull a magnet and really learn from the perspective of those who are experiencing homelessness why they were homeless. So this person didn't have a safe place, and that's what caused them to be homeless. Healthy relationships, they didn't have them. Treatment, affordable health care, healing, community, and all these different words, just dozens and dozens of words, were all put on this house. And I found something to be really interesting is all of these things, what they had in common was community. Community. These people lost their community, and that is the main contributor to them experiencing homelessness. So, for this work, for the exploration that I've done so far, the people that I've worked with specifically in Alaska, when it comes down to it, many of these people became homeless because they lost their community. And so, a great deal of my work is involving the community, bringing community back together, and not just, community working together to help homeless, but working with people who are homeless in small ways. And I think the biggest takeaway that I had for people is, we can all do something in our community to make a better living place. We can all do something. And for me, this is what I can do. I have a camera and it is my tool. And it gives me the ability to be able to try and give a platform to people to be able to speak who wouldn't normally otherwise be heard. And I challenge you to think about what is the thing that you can do, and think about how powerful that can be. And you don't have to go to the soup kitchen and volunteer. Maybe that's not for you, but maybe you're a gardener. Would you be willing to help build a garden that was like an eating garden where people could come and take food that's healthy and fresh? What if you are think about different things that you actually do now that you love. What are those things that you could do? Do you love to read books? Maybe you could volunteer with some of the youth organizations who work with homeless kids and be able to read those books to them to help them learn to read. So there are all of these different things that you can think about, like how you can contribute, what you can do. And I challenge you to do it, because what I'm finding consistently is that the loss of community for individuals causes them to spiral. When they don't have people who love them, when they don't have people who check in on them, they start to spiral. And so here is the installation of that house and the installation of those magnets. Now, lastly, I'm really totally blown away and honored to say that last year I received an individual artist award from the Rasmussen Foundation. And for my application, I wanted to be able to bring this project to Juneau. And I wanted to do the Through Our Eyes with Juneau. I wanted to find a Felicia that lives in Juneau and have a different person's perspective and another person's story. But with COVID, that hasn't happened yet. And because COVID continues to be a thing, and I felt like it was irresponsible for me to be traveling from Fairbanks to Juneau and work with one of our most vulnerable communities on such an intimate basis. And that felt wrong. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what am I going to do? What still is important? And so what I'm going to be doing instead is I'm going to be going back to the My Home in My Hands project and making them all light boxes that are illuminated. And I'm going to be doing, hopefully, it's kind of in the works. So you're getting the sneak preview of what will ideally happen. But kind of what's on scratch paper right now is I'd like to do a really big fundraiser dinner and have all that money go towards Stone Soup Cafe here in Fairbanks, since the people that I've been photographing for My Home in My Hands are exclusive to Fairbanks. And so I'd like to make them all into these beautiful light boxes. And I'm also creating video of it where we have their handwriting over the top of their image and they tell you their story. You hear their voice, you see their handwriting, and you learn why that object is so important to them. So that's all I have for you guys. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'm excited about any questions that you might have or any discussions that you're interested in having.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I've opened up people's ability to unmute themselves, so feel free to do so. Start up your video and ask any questions. While everyone's drumming up questions, because I'm sure that people are just a little shy right now. Sarah, I've
I have a question
oh,
for
go ahead,
Sarah.
go ahead, Petra.
It's Petra. Sarah, first of all, thank you so much. I'm also a member of the board at APC, and this was truly fascinating you for what you've done here. And I think it's something that takes a lot of courage, and you've taken it all even a step further. And yes, for challenging all of us to do maybe something that we can. But what I wanted to ask you, there's another here in Anchorage who had photographed homeless people he knew. He also, at one point, I haven't seen him but Huff is his name, and he. I remember talking to him, and he had at some point experienced aggression from some of the people that he had photographed, and he told me why. He explained how it happened, and my question: do you have a way to keep yourself safe? How how does it work that have found the people that you've dealt with? Um, how do you handle um, that potential issue within your project?
That's an excellent question. And for me personally, I usually always to go through organizations that people are involved in. And I let people kind of come to me. So I make sure that people are aware of what I'm doing and I ask the organization to kind of explain it. But I don't like go straight up to someone and be like, oh, hi, I see you're homeless. Like, can I tell your story? That's just doesn't work. I don't think, at least not for me. And I feel like it's really off-putting. Like I imagine myself in that situation and like a photographer, some strange person I don't know who wants to use my face for this issue and they want to know my deepest darkest secrets, and why did I get here and how did that happen? And so it's very intimate, a lot of the things that I do, and so I purposely go through organizations, one because those people tend to be more likely to be interested in being on a journey where they feel comfortable talking to me, and a lot of folks aren't though too. And so, I
Hmm.
think about how many people are at the Fairbanks Rescue Mission, and I only worked with 5 because
Yeah.
those were the people who were in a place where they were ready to talk. The other thing that I do too is I share my story with them, and that usually changes a dynamic in a big way. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
trying to exploit people, and I think that's something that's really challenging in this specific work. Is every organization I ever go to, any person that I meet, any person that I'm trying to explain work to, um, I feel like I have to try and convince them that I'm a good person, and that's hard, and
Hmm.
that is partially like a subconscious thing I just put on myself, but also it's because, I'm sure I know, as people have approached me before, that it crosses their mind, like, "Why do you do this?" And so, the presentation of my work has been really specific as well. I try to keep myself completely out of it unless it's a talk. And so then, I'm telling you what I do, how it works, how we put things together. But when I present the work in a gallery setting, I try not to be like in it. Like, this is about
Hmm.
them. This is not about me presenting photos. Like, I'm interested with different goals to share that work.
Hmm.
So I think, that is helpful too to like, but I think, sharing my story has a really big deal with it too. It's like, I'm able to say,
Yeah.
like, "I know where you're coming from. I've been there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I made it
Yeah.
out. Like, there's hope." And that's a strong
Yeah.
message. And on top of that, other people do just approach people. Like, there's a really amazing photographer in Anchorage who I really admire, and he owns and is the creator of the Wool Sock Project. And he actually goes right up to people who are experiencing homelessness on the street and, wants to chat with them, but he also often goes with state troopers to escort him,
Hmm.
and sometimes he doesn't though, and a lot of people he's gotten to know, and just like a lot of people I've gotten to know intimately, like, these people, I love them, they're my friends. Like, they're not like my subjects. Like, Felicia is a good friend of mine. We talk a lot, we keep in touch, like, all the big
Yeah.
stuff we're talking. And she's not my subject, she's someone who's very important to me. And I think, when you truly do have your heart in the right place and you're genuine, it shows, or at least I hope it does. And so for Felicia, she
Mm.
shared this with people, her friends, and so then some of her friends have now been interested to work with me, because if Felicia trusts me, then they're way more likely to trust me. And so it's a very slow process, I think,
Sure.
particularly in the beginning when I first decided to pursue this project through the venue of a class assignment. Most people really didn't want to work with me because they're like, "I don't know. Does this mean you don't know what you're doing? Like, who are you? I don't really want you to learn with this vulnerable population." And for me, it was already more like, I want to help them tell their stories because I know how it was to have been there.
Hmm.
Have
Did
you
you
guys
have any pushback from any of the, um, I don't want to say authorities, but did you have pushback from any directions at all? Or was it always, did you always have full on support from all directions?
Oh, no, definitely not. I, was in Anchorage, and I went to a meeting that was the Ending Homeless Coalition in Anchorage, and I was invited, and, they asked me to speak, and so I came to their thing, and I wanted to invite them to the show, because I think a lot of times people are really nervous about going into galleries if that's not really a place that they're comfortable in. And it was challenging too to have the work in a gallery when this work was not just for people who weren't experiencing homelessness. This work was for people who made the photos. Like, they made this, and I wanted to make sure that they could be surrounded by their artwork. So this had kind of two lives. It lived in the gallery for a month, in several different galleries, but then it went um, to Sewn Soup, to places that they actually live and are, so that they can be surrounded by their own work, by people who they know and love, who have made these beautiful images. And but anyway, I was presenting there, and after the presentation, everyone was so lovely, and it's really neat because their coalition is built of people who are actually homeless. So you're getting people who are homeless or have experienced homeless to actually participate in the coalition that is making things better for people who are homeless. I just thought that was so beautiful and like such a good way to structure it. Anyway, after the meeting, someone approached me and started to, yell at me in the library in public, and they just thought, that this was not the way, and the way that I was choosing to do this was not okay, and 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 you just I've had a lot of that, unfortunately. I wouldn't say that's the majority, but it certainly exists, and, people are entitled to their opinions, and this is a hot button topic, especially when my challenge is to kind of put the responsibility back on people who, are living just their daily lives every day, and saying, um, "Are we responsible for our neighbors? Are we responsible for the community that we want to live in? What does that mean? What does that look like? And what does it mean when you put it into action?" And sometimes people don't really like that message either. And so I think it depends on the people, and even within the organizations that support our homeless communities and our homeless populations, I had some pushback from some of them who really didn't like my project. And so for their particular residents, they, banned my Through Our Eyes cameras on their campus because they didn't want anyone to be participating in that. And so they didn't. And that was hurtful, but at the same token, I think it's part of this journey, and thinking about, why did they do that? How could I do better in the future? What is something? Was it a specific thing I said? Is it how I presented work? Was it because at the time I didn't have reference photos of what I was doing? And so I try to take these experiences as learning opportunities, but they can definitely be really hard. Like, after the shouting experience in Anchorage, I definitely went in my car and cried. Because also, I this project's really important to me, and it's something that is so personally important to me. I have lived this. And when someone brings it up to me, like, the way you're presenting this is disrespectful or whatever, I hear that because I think, oh my gosh, is it? I really want to think about what I'm doing, and everything has to be very intentional. Everything, the way that I'm printing things, the way that I make it accessible to the people to view the art, everything in this has been well thought out and intentioned on purpose, because you can't just willy-nilly do things, particularly when you're working with people who are so vulnerable. And so you have to make sure that it's equitable in some way.
Well, thank you. And yeah, good luck, and
Thank you.
food for thought, that's for sure.
I'll jump in if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes, so great presentation. Really enjoyed it a lot, Sarah. Thank you. And so I live in Midtown Anchorage, and our home is right on the Chester Creek Bike Trail. And in recent years, we've really had an explosion of homeless camps and people in the Greenbelt area here, right by our house. And I'm involved in our community council. I'm been involved in the community council for a number of years. And I don't have a question, but just an observation. I heard what you said about how some people are really, it's a hot button issue for people. And it's really fraught with all kinds of, unseen landmines. But I think you're doing a great job with it. And even though we've been really impacted right here in our neighborhood by this issue, by this problem, I I've I agree with you that nobody wakes up one day and decides, well, I think I'll be homeless. I think that'll be the life for me. No more alarm clocks, no more boss, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody thinks that way. Although here in Anchorage, there's a lot of people, and you see it in letters to the editor and various forums, and even at the community council meetings, assembly meetings, that this is, it's a very simple matter. This is their choice. It's their choice to, do ABC that leads to homelessness. So, it's not my responsibility type of an attitude. So that's frustrating. I don't believe that's true at all. There's so many issues that work into it. But I've hit upon sort of a philosophy that I'll share with you, and let me collect my thoughts for just a second here. There's a lot of debate about in the community councils, in the assembly, and a lot of the pushback that you hear when somebody puts forth an idea like a center that caters to the various needs of the homeless people. We have the Sullivan Arena right down here right now, and there's been other places. The assembly wanted to buy some properties for various treatment centers and so forth, and the other neighborhoods, that not in my backyard, just exploded in those areas, and a lot of the arguments against some of those initiatives was, well, you're not going to solve this part of the problem, or here's this other part. Oh, you're not even addressing this other part of the problem. And inevitably folks can always find something that a solution doesn't cover. And that's been sort of the go-to argument against, for a lot of people, is, well, if it doesn't solve the whole problem, then it's not a viable solution and we need to just forget about it right now. And my thought on that is, if there was a silver bullet, if it was an easy problem to solve, it would have been solved a long time ago. It wouldn't be still with us. There is no easy answer. So the answer has to be all of the above. We have to do all of these things, not just one here and one there, but we have to do them all, and we have to keep doing them. And anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. But
No, I think you have a really good point. I believe that homelessness is multifaceted. There is no one quick, fast answer. And that's just true. I mean, we're looking at, kind of what you were talking about earlier. There are people who are houseless, people who don't desire to live in a house, but they're not homeless. They have access to resources. And so that's different than being homeless. And so I think that can be really confusing for people and frustrating. And I think that's where some of these stereotypes maybe start coming from, is because they're like, oh, well, they choose this. And it's like, no, they don't choose homelessness. That's different. And also, who are we talking about when we talk about homeless? There's different sections: people who live and work in a program, or people who are out on the street. Those are two completely different worlds that we're talking about, with completely different issues and access to resources and all kinds of stuff. And so I think, there are a lot of different things that will need to be done in order to solve homelessness. But I think that, then that's part of why I bring my work to where I bring it, where it's like, okay, I may not be able to solve homelessness, but I can do one thing that can help.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a great attitude, and thank you so much for all you're doing. It's great work.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Really quick here, I wanted to show off your website very quickly and let everyone know that they should definitely drop by and see images of all of these shows and projects that you've been working on. Bonnie Landis, our president of the board, actually mentioned something that I forgot to mention at the beginning, was that Sarah's work has been featured in Rarefied Light throughout the years as well. And so I wanted to use that as excellent segue into the Alaska Photographic Center and the fact that Rarefied Light 2021 is back and the call is open currently. So if you've got new work through the pandemic era that you're particularly proud of, definitely make sure that you're submitting your work there. We've got some new exciting opportunities for new venues as well as new cities that we're exploring, taking the exhibition to. So there's a lot of amazing things there. Are there any other questions before we end tonight? Well, I just wanted to thank you so much, Sarah, for doing this and for sharing all of these projects. And thank you so much for taking your activism to a new, exciting level each time with all of these amazing projects. I've been really amazed at seeing what you've accomplished and what you've set forth, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new, exciting thing that you do next.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me.
Any other questions? A lot of stayovers, so feels like
Thank you,
summer.
Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. Very good.
I think that's it, Sarah.
Okay.
But thank you so much for staying a little later, and
Oh,
thank you
absolutely.
for just everything that you went over. It was amazing to see the kind of progression from each project to the next, and having your insight. I wanted to ask you a question about any resistance that you meet because so many people use the homeless as uh, that it's almost become an obsession of some photographers to end up taking pictures of just people in bad situations, to
Yeah.
take advantage of them. And I'm sure that you've gotten, I feel like you've already answered this question in your original response to Petra, but I'm sure that that's where you're getting some of the resistance is that there's so many people that go the wrong way with all of this, thinking that if they just take one picture and post it on Facebook and get 300 likes, that they're going to change the world. And what you're telling us is it's much more about boots on the ground and actually doing something and talking to these people rather than just taking advantage of them in these situations.
Yeah, something I forgot to say is one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue this in photography, aside from using a class as a venue to be able to do it, is something I've wanted to do for a long time. Is I thought about all of the photos. If you Google homelessness, what do you see?
Yeah.
And I look at those images and I think, yeah, that's only one part. That's just one small part. And it's maybe at the forefront seems like the most visible part,
Yeah.
but I knew it wasn't my story. And I wanted to make images that represented what I believed homelessness was, or what I have seen, or what my experiences have been based off of. And I thought that was really important to make images that people can really learn from and give an insight into like what exactly is it to be homeless. And no, it's not wandering around the street drunk, although yeah, some people do that, but it's one part. It's not the whole thing. But that's what we see photos of. And also I think what I had a problem with is people taking photos of people without their consent. Like all of the images that I have made the person who is in them is 100% aware that I am photographing them. This is a collaboration. It's a joint thing. I'm not just like sneaking behind bushes photographing people when they're down, Like this is about their story. And yeah, their story has some ugly parts to it. All of us do. But it was really important to me that this work felt like a collaboration. This wasn't me saying, "Oh, can you stand this way and, put your hands together like you're praying?" No. This was really straight documentary work where I made images of things that were happening. They weren't created. And I think, that was a really important element for me. And also, and a big part of that pushback does come from the fact that, you know, there have been dozens, maybe hundreds of other people before me who have gone to pursue this, some maybe with a good heart and others maybe not. And, they've hurt people and they've hurt people. They've hurt our most vulnerable population. That's horrible. So, of
Especially,
course,
yeah,
yeah,
especially when it's just for a photo, and
yeah,
it's for that congratulatory element of photography. It's not there to truly help anyone, and so any pushback you're getting is likely because for every one of you, there's 100 of them that keeps
yeah,
on taking advantage of them, and it's not just photographs. It's anything just to like take advantage of them in any way, shape, or form.
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
totally agree. And so of course the organizations who work with our homeless populations are going to be particularly protective because they
sure.
have to be. If
Yeah,
they are not, who is? And so it was tough to, break in with every organization that I worked with because, I had to come in and I told them my story.
yeah,
And that was a big part of it. I think them understanding like where I was coming from was the motivation of my work. Like I was interested in homelessness as an issue and wanting to give people a platform to speak, not putting a feather in my cap
sure.
that I am working with people who are homeless. And so, but also that's been really tricky. I kind of talked about this a little bit in the questions, but it was really hard to figure out how to present the work. How do I promote it without like shoving my name out in front?
Yeah,
And, it's about the people who I'm photographing, especially with the Through Our Eyes project, something that we talked about a lot and I had to talk about with volunteers was that what the project is for the people doing it. Like that's the project. The photos are a byproduct of that project.
yeah,
And, it's the process of them being able to be a photographer. They're not some homeless person, they are a photographer.
yeah,
They
yeah,
get to look at their life and think about it and reflect. And that experience is the project. Now, it's lovely that we get photos and we get a byproduct of that project. But a lot of times the volunteers, they were like, how many cameras did we get back? And we didn't get a lot of cameras back. But that's not the point. The point is that they got to participate in this experience that they otherwise might have never done before, that they got to be something else, and that they got an opportunity to tell their story. And like that is the part of it. And so, for Through Our Eyes, it was exceptionally challenging when I was in the Bear Gallery because, yeah, I coordinated it. And yeah, took the portraits of the people. That was like this much of the project, and the project was about them. And so we had a lot of discussion about how to put my name on there, or if we do, or if we don't. And they ended up putting my name on there because that was just kind of like the standard for that particular gallery. But, frankly, I was really uncomfortable with it because I was like, these aren't my photos.